The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When the days were completed for their purification, according to the law of Moses, Mary and Joseph took Jesus up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, just as it is written in the law of the Lord, "Every male that opens the womb shall be consecrated to the Lord," and to offer a sacrifice of a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, in accordance with the dictate in the law of the Lord. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, awaiting the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Christ of the Lord. He came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform the custom of the law in regard to him, he took him in his arms and blessed God, saying, "Now, Master, you may let your servant go in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you prepared in the sight of all the peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory for your people Israel." The child's father and mother were amazed at what was said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, "Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be contradicted. And you yourself a sword will pierce, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed." There was also a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived 7 years with her husband after her marriage, and then as a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day with fasting and prayer. And coming forward at that very time, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were awaiting the redemption of Israel. When they had fulfilled the prescriptions of the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. The child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Is God a giver or a taker? If I were to do a little catechism test here and pass around a little slip of paper and you have 2 answers, you can mark down that he's a giver or a taker, I bet you would all pass the test. Yeah, God's a giver. God's generous, he's big, he's magnanimous, he's big-hearted. You'd all get it right. Yet, almost on a daily basis, not just almost, on a daily basis, our actions say otherwise. That he's not a giver, he's a taker. And he just might take something precious or important for me that makes life beautiful, and I don't want that. I don't want him to take that from me. If I'm generous with my time right here, I'm going to lose out on this important rest that I need to catch up on. If I bow my head down just a little bit and admit that I was wrong about something, I might lose the esteem I have in others, and so I better not admit I was wrong. If I'm generous with my resources, well, then I won't be able to do the great things maybe someday I'll want to do. And yet, in each one of these moments, as God is inviting us to give something up, to sacrifice. And we feel it in our heart, too. We feel conflicted. There's this proposal. We see it's a good thing. we kind of see it's God that's the one queuing it up, and I don't know, maybe not, because maybe he's a taker and not a giver. There's a kid's book about being a bucket dipper, like you dip into other people's buckets or you put into other people's buckets. Anyways, sorry. Kid reference for those of you who had kids. There's something about buckets and dipping. And anyways, God's we act as if God's the taker. He's going to pull something out of our precious goods. And then we'd never see it again. And it'd be horrible. And life will be all the worse for it. Now, God knows that we think that way and act that way, and that's part of what's wrong with us. As a matter of fact, it actually points back to something of what must have happened in the Garden of Eden, where they didn't want to give God his due. God's pouring out everything to them, and their role was to just give it all back. And they did that a lot. And then they receive it from again, and there's just this complete interchange of giving and receiving and giving and receiving. And they wouldn't have thought of it in terms of taking, like he's taking this from me. And so at some point, the devil comes in and plants that seed, that doubt that, he doesn't want you to eat from that tree because he knows that your life will be better and you won't need him, and so that's why he's prohibited this. He's taking something from you that you could have that makes life wonderful. And they said, oh my goodness, maybe you're right. Crunch. Bit right into the apple. We know it's much more tragic than that. It wasn't just a simple momentary lapse of judgment or something. There must have been some major turning of their back and saying, we don't trust you. So much that it ruptured their relationship with God. But what we see then throughout all of salvation history leading up to Jesus is that God's trying to get them and get us back into that relationship of giving and receiving and giving and receiving. He's trying to show us, no, you can trust me. You can trust me. And I'm going to be asking a lot from you. But you can trust me. At some point, Adam and Eve lost trust. So they stopped giving. One of the key moments, one of the key, elements that we see, and what we see happening in the gospel today, the presentation of the temple, is that by the time the Israelites are in Egypt and they're enslaved there, they're freed because there's this thing about this firstborn of the Egyptians all being sacrificed, but they didn't have to sacrifice theirs because they had sacrificed a goat instead or a lamb and spread the blood over the lintels of the doorposts, and that's how they were spared. But when they get into the desert, then God tells them, I want you to give me every firstborn. The firstborn is mine. Now, this is funny because I'm looking at one or two firstborns out here right now. And it's like, you can just imagine how horrific the thought is. If God's really a taker and you're going to take that baby and just give it over to the Lord, it's like, whoa, hold on a second, maybe not. Because that's everything to me. It's the most beautiful thing I have. It's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. My child. And God's saying, no, you can trust me, give it to me. There's this whole rite where instead of sacrificing their child, they would sacrifice something else instead. 2 turtle doves for those who didn't have much money, or 2 pigeons, or 2 doves. Abraham and Isaac, that's the exact same thing was going on there. God's saying, do you trust me? Do you trust me to offer your child? Do you trust to offer the most precious thing that you have over to me? Will you give that to me? And Abraham does the most incredible thing. In the book of Hebrews, it says it there, how he was tested, and that he believed that God could bring life back to his child if he were to offer that child to Isaac, to the father. He believed God would give life. There's something that had already healed inside of Abraham where it's no longer, I can't give you this because you might just do something bad and I'll never see, my life will never always be worse because of it. As if God was a taker. But God is a giver. So now, we see this moment. This seems like just like a little vignette from the life of Jesus and Mary and Joseph. We're now 1,000 years, 2,000 years later, or however long it was, when Mary's had Jesus. The time for her purification has come up, and they're presenting him in the temple. That's why this is the Feast of the Presentation. They're doing that thing prescribed back in Exodus about bringing your firstborn into the temple and turning him over to God. And so you literally, physically hand it over to the priest. And then you have to ransom it back by paying some money, making this sacrifice of something else instead of the actual sacrifice of sacrificing your child. This is one of those difficult passages in the Bible that if you're like a militant atheist will look at it, look at this is ridiculous. Look at God's making you sacrifice your baby, and it's like, what an evil, mean God. Well, yeah, if you think God's a taker, yeah. But this is where God flips the script. Because already he's allowed, okay, no, I'm not actually going to take your child. That's what I want from you. I want you to give me the best, the greatest, the most important thing to me. But he doesn't actually take it, though. He wants to receive it, but he wants to bless it and give it back. Multiply it, expand it. But he knows that's too much for us still because we're still not trusting. And so he said, okay, well, sacrifice these 2 turtle doves instead. Because I don't want you to have to go through what you really need to give to me, a pure, perfect offering to make up for all the lack of generosity you haven't had. And so this is where he flips the script. He says, and you know what? I'm not even going to make you have to do this at all. I'm going to do this with my own son. And I'm giving my own son to you to be sacrificed. And I will give life to my son, and I will give my son to you, and you will have him forever because I've offered him to you. And he wants to help us turn that around now for ourselves. That as we give things to God, yes, it, quote, dies there in the moment. Our time, our ego, our pride, our whatever is the stand-in for your, quote unquote, air quotes, firstborn. And what he wants to do is give it new life, give it better life, and give it back to you. But we're always caught. We're caught. No, if I give it up, it's not going to be so good. If I give up my afternoon, if I give up my forgiveness. God is a giver, not a taker. So maybe that's something to think about here. So we celebrate this Feast of the Presentation. It's actually also, John Paul II made this a feast to celebrate consecrated life. All those who have given up their life with vows. Actually, you all do it too. You are married. You give it up to each other. But those who give it up directly to God through consecration, nuns, priests, brothers, monks, consecrating their lives to God, how in a certain way it's like the same thing is going on, turning everything over to God. That's what I did, and I don't do it perfectly, that's for sure. But I know that in as much as I've done it, what I get back is 100-fold. Absolutely. Like for me, no regrets on my path. Absolutely none. I'll just close with a story from C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. I don't know if you've read it or not. You can read it, listen to it, either way. Great read. It's small, it's fiction, and the whole premise is that these people are showing up at the gates of heaven and kind of deciding if they really want to go in or not. Interesting premise. Usually we think that, I just go and God's just going to throw open the gates and we'll walk right in. No, I think C.S. Lewis was really onto something that it's like, well, you get there and it's okay, now do you really want this? Do you really want heaven? And each of the characters, some of them go in, some of them don't, but they're kind of faced with a contradiction of something that they need to let go of or transform. And this one story that goes right along with the Feast of Presentation is this woman arrives to heaven, and she's expecting, and she's so looking forward to seeing her toddler son that she had lost when some time ago, tragically. And so, rightly so, she's really excited to get to see her little Tommy, or whatever his name, I'll just say Tommy. And she gets there and says, I want to see Tommy. And the angel says there, says, yes, of course. He's here, he's so happy, he's so looking forward to seeing you. But would you like to see Jesus first? We would like to come into the Lord's presence, and then you'll see Tommy too. And she says, no, I want to see Tommy first. I said, well, okay, you're going to see him. He's right here. He's really looking forward to this, but just come into God's presence and rejoice. And she says, no, I want to see Tommy now. And if heaven is anything the way it's supposed to be, I would be allowed to see Tommy right now. And it's like this, like as you're reading this story, it just like grips you. Like, why can't she see? Just go in, lady, and you'll get your Tommy. And it gets to the point where she says, well, forget this. If I can't see my Tommy, I don't want anything to do with it. If it's a God that won't let me see my Tommy right now, I don't want anything. And she storms off and leaves. If she had just stayed there, if she had just been that much more willing to offer everything over to God, she would receive everything in return, multipliers better than the way she had it to begin with. God is a giver, not a taker. Even when sometimes it seems like he's going to take this from you. So, as your own takeaway, think what is it that maybe God's been asking me, or that he could be asking me, or he habitually is asking me, and I'm constantly saying, nope, not that, not that. And I'm just not giving him a yes. He wants to bless you, but he needs the reciprocal circle to start going. He's already begun it, but he needs you to do your part to say yes, and I give this over to you. I give it back. Because when we're in heaven, we're going to be giving everything to God, and we're going to be receiving everything from God right back, and we're giving it back to him again. And it's just gone this complete, total self-giving and receiving, and it's going to be just absolutely glorious. And he wants us to begin to experience that now. But we have these trust issues. So he's going to stretch us out. But each time he does, I guarantee you he's going to bless it. Have you ever had an instance where you were like hesitant to, I don't know, like help somebody with some project, some issue, something like that? I don't want to. I'd rather rest today. I've been kind of worn down. And then you go and you actually do the thing. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I did that. That was the most amazing. I can't believe I was going to not do it, because in order to fill in the blank as something way more lame than what it was you actually did. That's who God is. And you can bank on that.